What can we realistically expect from the Bulls this year? Welcome in or welcome back. Another content creator episode today. Super excited about this. To date, and I don't think that this will be beaten. The largest content creator that we have had on the channel so far, over 10,000 subs on YouTube, 1.5 million views on the same platform. The king of basketball trivia tournaments on YouTube. Everyone, welcome to the channel, Super Mario Hoops.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you having me on. Glad to be on here for this epic collab. And yeah, man, glad to talk about my Bulls. Or am I?
Well, that's what we're here to find out. I will say that, and we'll touch on this later, you all have had better years for sure. But if you could, during this little intro here, I'd like to give everybody a platform to kind of explain why and how they became the fans of the teams that they are. What's your why? How did you get here being able to root for a team that's going to win 35 games next year? What was your journey to this point?
I mean, it's kind of a typical, I guess, starting point for getting into the fandom. Most people get their teams maybe from their family or something. And so my family grew up as Bulls fans and Cubs fans and Bears fans and stuff. So, like, that's kind of, my stuff. Not the White Sox, but, the Bulls have pretty much always been my team. And especially, you know, like my dad's favorite player is Michael Jordan. So, like, he grew up during that time, and then I came just a little bit after, and so um, yeah, man. I mean, it's pretty much just stuck since. When I like first started watching basketball, it was, I would say, like the 2007-8 season. That was like the first year that I started watching, and that was just before we got my guy Derrick Rose, who is actually my favorite player ever and the youngest MVP ever. So to see those years in his prime as well, it really made me feel good as a Bulls fan. And then once those years have passed and all the years since, it has not been as pleasant to be a fan. I mean, of course, I'm still rooting for the team, and it's really weird because sometimes you got to decide, like, when you're later in the season, do you root for them to get a good pick, or do you root for them to make that playoff push? And that's really the hardest part about our team, because we're in the middle for so many years since 2016. I think pretty much every year except for one, which is the 2021-2022 season, we've been like at best an 8 seed. So it's been tough. I don't think a team from Chicago, you think of the big market, like we shouldn't be in that situation, right? But unfortunately we am. But yeah, I mean, one way or another, I'm still gonna support my team, even if sometimes I might clown on the players, I might clown on the front office, especially the coaching, especially. But I'm still here supporting them, loyal to the team, loyal to the soil. So
I mean, if you're not bullying your favorite team's GM and coaches, are you even really a fan?
exactly, you know what I mean. But some people, like, they just want to be that, I guess, delusional fan that, like, they have optimism every year. See, I can't be that fan. Like, I know some people who are those fans, and credit to them, because I can't do that. Like, I just gotta, when I see something that stinks, I'm gonna point out this stinks.
I think that the Bulls, probably better than anybody, have encapsulated this idea of hitting all three levels of success for a team. Especially in my lifetime of being a basketball fan, I have seen the Bulls be a number one seed, have expectations for a championship. I've also seen them be a dumpster fire. And then I've also seen them in this weird middle space that they're in currently where they could make the play in. They're probably a late lottery team. Who knows? Is it hard being a fan of a team that is like that rather than someone that's a fan of a team that's always successful or is always a bottom feeder?
I mean, yeah, and it sucks. However, the one thing I would say is, like, it's just been so long now of a dumpster fire that I'm not surprised by the disappointment. I mean, you even got to think about just even when we were at our best, like, we literally traded Derrick Rose away thinking that he was done, he wasn't going to do anything, and then he goes on to score more points the rest of his career than the three guys he was traded for. We traded Luol Deng for 24 hours at Andrew Bynum to save money for the remainder of that season, just so we could sign Pau Gasol and use up that money the next season, who he left in 2 years. I mean, think about the last dance season. We just three-peated a second time, and they wanted to break up the team. They were firm on it. So, I mean, even when we have, like, the best that there is to offer, maybe sometimes, like, it doesn't matter. Sometimes that's just not enough for us. So, I mean, I guess it is what it is. Somehow we still have some of them, like we're up there as the fourth most, tied for the fourth most championships in NBA history for a team. So it's, when you think about it like that, it's pretty crazy. But there's just so many moments where it's like this could have been done differently. This could have been better. Maybe we could be seeing ourselves at even more championships, even in like the more recent eras, like the D Rose eras. You know,
Some could make the argument that all of this is just the price that you pay for selling your soul in the 90s and winning 6 championships.
I've seen some people say it, and it stinks because like I was born in like 2001, so like technically I was born before Michael Jordan was totally done, but that was like Wizards Michael Jordan. You know what I mean? Um, like
We
so
don't
I
talk about
haven't.
those years.
Yeah, like that's just whatever. But I have seen our team at the top. Like I witnessed the youngest MVP ever season, and the season after that, when I actually thought we were a better team, and I actually thought he was a better player, even if he didn't have a better season. I felt like he was actually a better player that season. Um, and we just really haven't had that ever. I would say since 2015 was like the last time. And then we had that glimpse in 21, 22 where we were the one seed for like half the year. And then, of course, Lonzo goes down. I know we'll talk about that later, but, it just hasn't been the same since.
Because of your fandom, you've obviously very high highs and very low lows. Is there a particular moment that sticks out to you as a favorite moment as a fan?
So I guess just in general for our team, even though I wasn't alive for it, I still think that the 1998 NBA Finals Game 6, when Michael Jordan had that sequence where he went 2 for 1, cut it to a 1 point game, got the steal on Malone, and then hit the shot of shots to win the sixth championship. I mean, you don't see, like, what star has a storybook ending like that with a franchise like that? It just doesn't really happen. You know what I mean? So that's still, in my opinion, the most like chilling shot in NBA history. You could make an argument for like maybe Ray Allen or Kyrie Irving and some other shots recently. But to me, especially as a Bulls fan, maybe a little bit biased, but that's what it is to me. Favorite moment that I've seen, it has to probably be, Derrick Rose's bank shot game winner against the Cavs in Game 3 of the 2015 second round. Um, just because I remember that was a really great day, like a little bit of a storybook moment for the whole day because we went to so I'm actually from the kind of the Chicagoland ish area, and we took a field trip that day to Navy Pier during the day, which is in Chicago. And then it was a great day. Went on the Ferris wheel, did mini golf, went on a boat on Lake Michigan. It was epic. The bus ride was fun, like there and back. And then to come home and just see a madhouse on Madison like that, it was unexplainable. You couldn't really match that. However, I will say that my favorite Derrick Rose moment is going to be a little complicated because my favorite Bulls moment that I've seen is different. My favorite D Rose moment is actually when he hit the game winner on Brandon Jennings against the Bucks. And I say that because Brandon Jennings was probably my second favorite point guard in the league at that point, and Derrick Rose was my number one. And it's like, you're good. I like you, Jennings, but you're not him. So that's why that's my favorite.
Yeah, there's definitely levels to this. Just to chip in on you, it wasn't a Bulls moment, but I think for a lot of people who aren't Bulls fans, I think a very easy number one Derrick Rose moment is when he scored 50 for the Wolves.
Yeah.
I mean, there wasn't a dry eye in the house for me. Absolutely not. Especially when he got emotional. I was like, oh, Derrick, don't do this to me. I cannot handle this.
My friend and I, we were trick or treating because that was, I think, maybe the last year we did trick or treating, and we had to pause like Halloween. Like we're like, we gotta watch how this ends. So it was just crazy.
One last question before we start looking at the season for a preview. I want to know what level of a Bulls fan you are. I want to know your like favorite, maybe forgotten Bulls player, someone who was just so nice for your team, but if you brought it up in casual conversation, I'll go, who?
Well, so first of all, I know like of my era, the players I'm most fond of course D Rose, but just all those guys from that era. So like Joakim, Luol Deng, Kyle Korver's another one that he wasn't really with us long, but he was actually one of my favorites. I have his jersey. Unfortunately, the number is kind of peeled off, so hasn't seen the best days. But I would say and of course Taj Gibson. Nikola Mirotic is actually another one of mine. Fun fact: I have a framed picture of his in my bathroom. So it's literally
Just for
maybe a little bit.
safekeeping, or
Yeah, just for safekeeping. You know, just looking out for anyone, making sure no one's pulling any funny business in there. Um, thinking of some of those, I would say, one player, actually a few players that go a little bit forgotten that were nice early on when Derrick Rose was there. I'll give you two, and they actually should be known, but I don't think they get enough credit. But Tyrus Thomas and John Salmons. I think those are two players that, especially John Salmons, once he went to the Kings and the Bucks, maybe got more recognition, but he was really good for us too. And I will say as well, because this guy's also kind of viewed more as like a Clipper, I feel like, but Elton Brand was, in my opinion, probably one of like peak wise one of the best bigs that we ever had too. So I'll give credit to those guys. I know they're not super unknown. I could have done a little bit of deeper digging, like a Tom Bowerwinkle from the '70s, if you wanted. I could have threw out Kyle Macy in there, like Sidney Green or something weird. But I feel like there is just a lot of guys that we've had, and I'll shout out another one actually, Captain Kirk Heinrich. He was not someone who's really necessarily forgotten, but I feel like he was the heart and soul of our team for so many years as well. That I want to give him his due flowers.
listen, all those answers were perfectly fine. I posted a short form video recently. I was just like scrolling on TikTok and found this guy who said something along the lines of name a forgotten power forward, and one of the most liked answers was LaMarcus Aldridge. I'm like, okay, we've
Yeah,
lost the
like
plot if 20,000 points in a career is somehow forgotten. So all those answers perfectly fine with me.
I appreciate that. Actually, I'll give you one more, Orlando Woolridge,
Yeah,
as
good
well.
one.
That's a
Good
nice one.
poll. Yeah. Now as we're transitioning into what the season could, but you've kind of alluded to it already. We're probably in a similar situation that we have been in the last couple of years where you could be a playoff team. You're probably late in the lottery. How do you stay so positive or try to stay positive when coming into season after season after season, you kind of understand where you're going to be and it's not going to change unless the ownership changes?
I mean, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily positive. It's mostly that I'm just, maybe numb to the bad times already. That if something bad happens again, like I'm probably gonna expect it until something dramatic changes. If we have a season where we're like top 4, 5, or 6 seed, then I'm going to expect us to be trending in the right direction because it's like, okay, we made a surefire playoff spot. And if we maybe put up a fight like a team like Orlando or Detroit did last year, I'm going to expect us to maybe get closer to taking the next step because we really have kind of a young team now. I mean, with the exception of Vucevic and maybe like Javon Carter, most of our team is pretty young now. I think maybe the next oldest is like Zach Collins or something, who's like 28. Um, so, I mean, I would expect us to be moving in that direction if we did. Um, but ultimately, like, I'm not totally sold, even though this is an Eastern Conference year that seems down because, of course, your Boston Celtics, with Jason Tatum being injured and really haven't filled in much, like at the center position, I would say that it kind of just seems like they're just going to roll with what they got. Of course, the Pacers have no Halliburton. The Bucks, like, they basically just lost Dame. Like, there is openings in the East for us to be maybe as good as a 4, 5, or 6 seed at best if we play to our potential. Will we? Probably not. Just because I know what comes with this team. We'll have streaks. We'll have maybe like a 6 or 7 game win streak, and then we'll lose like 5 of 6, and then that'll hurt us and bite us in the butt. So we probably will be in a better position seating wise than we were last year, but I don't know if it's gonna be like you know a super successful season. It's probably going to be like, maybe it was a little bit better than last year. Which last year we still did have to deal with, what we were doing with Levine, and then the year before that it was like we still got DeRozan on here. So I do think this year it's getting closer to kind of establishing a new identity on the team.
I think that if the Bulls this year, last year, year before last, if they would have just committed to the idea of scrapping everything for parts, we could probably be having a different outlook for this. But I feel like they held on just a little too long to that old guard. Of course, after they lost DeMar DeRozan, you still had Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic, but and now of course DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine is also with DeMar DeRozan in Sacramento now. The last guard, like you talked about, is Nikola Vucevic and Javon Carter, who was part of like an older roster. At the point that you get rid of them, I feel like you can just wipe your hands of the whole thing and go, hey, clean slate. But for whatever
Yeah.
reason, this team isn't committed to doing that, which I find weird. We'll talk about it later, but I know for a fact that earlier, like toward the trade deadline, the Bulls had an offer from at least two different teams who were offering a first round pick for Lonzo Ball. And then they decided to not do that and do just straight up 1-for-1. Weird
Yeah.
tactics by the front office. So I think at whatever point, maybe this trade deadline, if once you commit to go, hey, we're bad, we should probably just accept our fate, then you can really start this whole rebuild process.
Yeah, I just think like with our front office, we really just have attachment issues. Um, I mean, you think about like the Vucevic deal was probably the first big trade that our new front office made, and now it's going into like the fifth year, or actually the fifth full season, technically a sixth season with the team because he had that half year with us, and he's still there. And it's not like there's really a huge market for him. I know there's been like some Warriors rumors and Lakers rumors, but I really don't think there's been a huge market for him to the point where we might just have to let him go. And I still stand by the Patrick Williams thing. Like, he's going into his sixth season with our team, and I did not like the pick when it was made, and I don't like the pick now because he hasn't really done anything. And you'll learn that of all the current Bulls, he is my least favorite. So I just think that these are guys who have been there for like way too long, and it's like maybe I get it. Like our front office, Mark Eversley, Arturas Karnisovas, like these guys were brought in to make deals, maybe for the first time with as much, I guess, like free will as maybe because Karnisovas was with the Nuggets beforehand. But I think like now this is a situation where he's had the most free will to make these decisions, and so you get Patrick Williams, that's his first draft choice. You get Vucevic, that's his first big splash of a move, and it's just hard for them to let go. I don't know really, I can't really explain why, but it just seems like that is probably the most logical answer because Vucevic, when we got him, I was excited because I actually really liked Vucevic in Orlando. Um, he was one of my favorite centers in the league, and he was an all-star caliber player. And I think the first couple years with us pretty much showed that, like, not too bad. But I think now it's at a point where you don't want him probably as your starting center. And I know he puts up great numbers, but I think that the liability that he also provides for a team at a starting center spot, it outweighs that.
Yeah, absolutely. I won't be first in line as a Celtics fan, as a Celtics representative, to go and try and acquire Nikola Vucevic at this point. But if you ever want to get rid of Javon Carter, you let me know. I'll talk to Brad and we'll work something out. I'm a big Javon Carter fan. I wish it would work out in Chicago. It just hasn't worked out for him.
I just think that maybe a little bit kind of like Caruso, where I think Caruso mentally checked out those later years with us. And once he got to OKC, it felt like new life because he just had probably the best season of his career, or at least the best season since his first year with the Bulls. And maybe Javon Carter could do that too. Because I actually, in college, I was a big fan of Javon Carter. Like, I thought he was really good. I felt like he was really scrappy. When we got him, I was like, okay, I'm excited. And then we were just a very mediocre team. And I feel like, also his minutes started to diminish, especially last year, to the point where I just don't feel like he really has much to care for, like in this rotation. Maybe if he goes to Boston, especially on a year like this where you guys might be down some players, maybe he could build his stock back up and probably be on a better team.
I'm going to try to not make this the Javon Carter Power Hour. I'm a WVU fan, so of course I was going to like Javon almost by nature. When his last year in Milwaukee really flourished there, playing with Giannis and not Dame, Drew Holiday, Bobby Portis, Brook Lopez, all those guys, he found a role so perfectly. He shot 40% from three on like 6 or 7 attempts a game. And then I was confused when he left that initial report of, I'm not coming back to Milwaukee. Thought it was weird. Then he signs in Chicago. He's a Chicago kid. I'm like, hey, this is pretty cool. And then, I don't know, like 20 games into that first season with Chicago, he's buried under the younger talent. And part of me understands that. Like, you want to give the young guys burn, especially in the situation that you all were in. but to have a defensive menace like that, who I'm not even going to bring up his 3-point shooting because it has diminished since that point, but just from a like his defensive grit, you don't want that on the floor at all. What are we doing?
Yeah, what are we doing? I mean, ask the new Hall of Fame inductee, Billy Donovan. Who I think is one of the biggest frauds, by the way. But
Billy
um,
can't get fired, Donovan. That's what I always call him.
yeah, I mean, seriously, I think at this point he's the longest tenured coach who has now won a championship with the current team he's with. Somehow he outlasted Popovich, who I thought would retire or would coach forever. So that just shows how long Billy Donovan is holding on and getting these secret contract extensions behind closed doors. Which, by the way, is still so slimy. The fact that not even Shams knew until midway through the next season that he got a contract extension. Like, what kind of team does that for winning
There,
one playoff game? By the way,
he must have some dirt on the owners or something. That's the only logical explanation.
dirt. He might have a landfill on him. That is just crazy.
Well, I don't want to. I don't want to make this episode too negative. Let's shift our focus a little bit. Let's talk about some potential positives. Let's talk about
Okay.
foundationally teams built through the draft. I think you got a really solid one at number 12 with Noah Sengay. You also picked up Lachlan Ulbridge at 55. We don't have to touch on it a lot, but I have seen a lot of Lachlan in the Bulls media recently. He's really impressing at workouts. All the coaching staff really, it seems like he's behind him. He seems like a real big energy guy. I think that he's going to be a G leaguer for the most of it. But do you see some sort of role for him on this team?
I think so. I mean, so I will say to start off, I mean, of course, we did just talk about Billy Donovan. He just does have a knack for not playing younger players as much. I mean, even last year, I still believe Booz Ellis was one of our best players, and it took him forever before he actually cracked the rotation consistently. Um, with Ulbrich, I think that, at the 55th pick compared to maybe Noah, the 12th pick, I think both of them will be solid for us. But I do think that, and rightfully so, being a second round pick pretty much near the end of the draft, probably was a better grab for that spot than like maybe Noah at 12, even though Noah's probably going to end up being the better player and play more this season. But with Ulbrich, I mean, I don't know. I feel like, in the NBL, he was actually showing flashes that he also showed in Summer League of kind of playing as a guard. I think that his handles really well for being a bigger player. I don't know if you remember, but I feel like the optimistic side of me could also see him developing the way that, and I didn't want to say this player when I was listening, like the Orlando Woolridges and all those guys, but I feel like I could see him developing the same way as like Andres Nocioni did for us way back then, where it's like he's an impressive playmaker, maybe a guy who can kind of be built like a wing and have defensive potential as well. But I think that he can become that kind of player, and hopefully, maybe lead our front office to choosing guys like him and guys like Noah, who I think with Noah, I don't expect him to get too many minutes either this year, maybe more than Ulbrich, but I feel like he definitely tries defensively, which is going to be good for us because we didn't have a lot of guys that did that last year, and I think that he plays with a lot of energy. Granted, of course, we all saw the summer league meme where he was on the wrong end of from Johnny Furphy, but I do think that it's going to help boost our team culture with him on the team, and then with both of those guys, hopefully it can start fizzling out some of these wings who have no point on this team that we've already seen, like a Patrick Williams or a Dalen Terry. Like maybe we can just get him out of the way.
Noah Sengay certainly had an unfortunate start to his career, but I think
Yeah.
I think the NBA media landscape moves so fast that you don't even really think about it anymore. Someone has to remind you, "Hey, you remember that time in summer league?" before you go, "Oh yeah, that did happen." So I think ultimately he's going to be fine. I think that I may be higher on Noah than other non-Bulls fans just from the game tape that I've seen in the summer league. I'm very much looking forward to the pairing between Noah Senge and Matas Buzelis. But what does the Bulls fan look forward to with that pairing specifically?
I will say too, again, like I don't think they'll get a whole lot of minutes, at least not at the start of the year. Maybe like later in the year they will, but just knowing Billy Donovan and how he treats the rookies, that's probably going to be hard to do. Um, I think, like I was saying, it does like boost our defense, and the team's going to play harder. Offensively, maybe set wise, I don't know how great that's going to go if like we're running plays mostly through both of them. I'm sure Buzelis is going to be a key option in the offense no matter what this year, but it might take another year or two before we get to that step. But I do think they'll play with, high energy, and sometimes those are the lineups that get you back in games, especially if we're down like 20 and we put both those guys in. Maybe that could help us come back, which is not super common for us in recent years. So I mean, I'll take it. I will take it.
Something you mentioned earlier that I want to bring back in this point. Billy Donovan did not play in pretty broad swath, did not play Matas Buzelis at all until like the 25-30 game mark of the season. And I think a lot of the people that weren't watching Bulls games were going, oh, wow, Matas has really like figured it out. No, Billy was just playing him. Like I'm sure that he's always had this. And if he played 30 minutes from game one, we would have seen like this sustained success, maybe talking about a rookie of the year potentially. Who knows? But we couldn't see it because you missed the first 30 games. And hopefully that's the same thing with Noah Senge.
The one thing I will say about Buzelis, and this is why I'm a big fan of his already, is I know he's from the Chicago-ish area, but you can tell that he wants to be on our team. Like you can get that interpretation that okay, Josh Giddey just signed, and I know we'll talk about that, but like okay, he wants to be here, and Kobe White, he wants to be here as well. But I feel entirely confident with all my heart that Buzelis does want to be here and he wants to see the team succeed. And as long as he is on our team, I feel confident that we can shift it in the right direction, even if our front office continues to make wacky decisions. The fact that we have him, and I know that he's going to eventually become a star, that's like, how should I say it? It's just a very like soothing feeling.
Yeah, I could definitely see how that would be reassuring. Even if you're bad, you want someone to be there. And who better than a Chicago kid to, bring up the Bulls from the ashes?
And I mean, to be fair, like with Derrick Rose as well. Sorry to cut you off, but just with Derrick Rose too. I mean, that was like he was treated like a superhero in the city. Now he's going to get his jersey retired because of what he did for us, even though with the injuries and stuff. So I feel like everyone wants to see Buzelis succeed, but they also want to see our team succeed. And I think it could definitely succeed through his leadership.
There's been this thing that Chicago always has someone from Chicago just on the roster at all times. And maybe it's just for vibes, maybe it's some good luck charm, but I think you have a really good one in Matas. As much as I love Ayu and as much as I love Javon Carter, they're not the guys that's going to bring Chicago into like this realm of success that you want. And even though he's still very young, obviously, I think that we could be talking about Matas being the guy in Chicago.
I've been a fan of Io as well. I even have his jersey actually. But I do think that, every year pretty much since his first year has felt a little bit more disappointing. It's not that he's necessarily bad, but it's like you expected maybe more from him at this point. And so I'm hoping that maybe with that being known that, okay, Buzelis, he's a Chicago kid and he's going to maybe bring us to the next level, that hopefully it doesn't make them seem like we need to keep Io for the vibes. You know what I mean? Like, if we keep him, so be it. But I don't think he should be like an untouchable. And I feel like that's kind of what he's been the last couple years. That I don't know if it should be like a mainstay thing.
Yeah, I can't imagine so either. I think that he's lacking as a player right now, and especially when you're in a situation like the Bulls are, you kind of want these players to figure out who they are while the team is bad. So when you are good, you're a completely formed player. And to this point, he just hasn't done that yet. So I hope the best for him, but at this point, he kind of reminds me a lot of Bones Highland.
I would say Io is slightly better. I'll give him that edge over Bones Highland, but I do see where you're coming from. I think they're like basically cut from the same cloth.
In addition to the 2 draft picks that you have, the Chicago Bulls do have one new toy to play with this year, and that's Isaac Okoro, who was acquired in a trade for Lonzo Ball. I think, speaking of short sticks, I think that Isaac Okoro may get the short stick here as well, because your forward room is a little packed with Matas, with your least favorite player in the league, Patrick Williams, with Noah Senge now as the draft pick. What kind of role, what kind of production do you see from him this year?
I mean, I don't think he should be starting anyways, but I do feel like he should be like that first forward off the bench. Um, you know, guys like Dalen Terry and Patrick Williams, like I said, they're probably going to have more freedom under Billy Donovan than Isaac Okoro, at least at the start. Um, I feel like he's better than both of those players personally. And I feel like on the perimeter, it helps us defensively with a guy who's capable of hitting a corner three. And the reason I say that, though, with like Terry and Patrick Williams, why I don't think they should be above him in the rotation is like those two guys. I know Dalen Terry's in his fourth year. Patrick Williams, now he's in his sixth year. Uh, they just haven't had that like NBA maturity moment, and there's like, in a way, it's kind of sort of wasting our timeline because we have so many guys that have come from that time. And I actually said this too about Kobe White for a while, where I feel like up until like his first 4 years, he really hadn't shown that. It wasn't until actually we got Patrick Beverly on the team, and then once Kobe White was playing more like a point guard, that I started to see that, and now I feel pretty confident in him. But I feel like Okoro has, at least to some capacity, and maybe that's because he's played on more meaningful teams like the Cavs. But I feel like that would automatically help us. But like I said, I don't think he should start. Maybe like a sixth or seventh man. And then I will also add that our other slight addition, I know you didn't have on here, but Yuki Kawamura. Want to shout out the legend. Nobody has circled game 82 of the season more than me for when he goes off for that 31 point, 11 assists masterclass. So
For the record, we love Yuki here. I just didn't add him because he's on a I don't know if it's a two-way deal or an Exhibit 10 deal. I don't forget which wording it was, but I do like Yuki for the record.
let's see if he can make it to game 8 before game 82. But it would be awesome.
We do have a couple of re-signings that I wanted to touch on. Of course, we have Josh Giddey, the biggest re-signing of the year, finally stopping this restricted free agent lockout for him. He signed a 4-year, $100 million deal. And they also brought back Trey Jones on a 3-year deal. Wanted to touch on Trey Jones for just a second. Don't know how you feel about him personally. I think that Trey and Tyus Jones are some of the most underrated point guards in the entire league. They're never going to be all-stars. They're never going to be all NBA. But just a like calming presence, a steady hand as a backup point guard is really super valuable in this league. And even though the record won't show it this year, probably, I think Trey Jones being that cool hand for a bench unit is as good of a pickup as you could have possibly got, or a re-signing in this case.
Well, for one, I do like this deal. I think that especially for a backup point guard, this is kind of the deal you're looking at. And of course, him and his brother are both elite when it comes to like assist to turnover ratio. I know that's like the biggest thing. I mean, this isn't hating on the Bulls. It's actually propping the Bulls. I feel like Trey Jones is underrated, and I feel like Tyus Jones is actually overrated. And the reason I say that is because, and maybe it's just because Trey Jones hasn't been in too many big NBA games yet, but Tyus Jones in the playoffs or like play in or scenarios that are like postseason level games, I just see him. Yeah, he might not have a whole lot of turnovers, but he does them in bunches, and they're really bad turnovers. Whereas Trey Jones, I mean, he might make those, but not so much in bunches. And you don't see Tyus Jones do that in the regular season. But that's like the only thing I just wanted to say there. But it does help us maximize possessions, especially like with a team who, for so many years, has struggled to hit 3-point shots. Having a guy who can pass can get that job done. Set people up, especially if he's driving to the basket, leaves a Kobe White open or a Josh Giddey open or something like that. But especially too, like with the team when we do have guys who can get sporadic at moments. Even like I said, Kobe, I think has shown more maturity. He still can have those moments where he does play a little bit out of control or sporadic. So having I guess, a calming presence like Trey Jones definitely helps. And a 3-year deal again, like for like basically 8 million a year. By the time that hits like the last year, even if we did decide to trade him before that last year, it would be incredibly easy, I think, to trade him. But I think having him for that deal in his third year, he's not going to be super old, so I like it.
From one facilitator to the next, of course, we do have to talk about Josh Giddey. I was convinced, literally up until we got the news from Shams, that he was just going to sign the qualifying offer, become an unrestricted free agent next year. Are you glad to see that this saga is over? Or do you think that this is a fair deal at all? or do you think that at some point you'll get burnt on this?
I'm glad to see it over because I do think he's earned it. Um, I think that I was not so sure about if I wanted to have us give him 30 million or more per year. Um, and I know his team was asking for that originally, but 20, 25 million a year, I'm fine with that. Like I said, by the time that hits like that last year, 25 million is going to look like maybe 17 million or 18 million in NBA terms, which I think that's a pretty good deal, especially for a guy who probably is only going to get better. Um, and he was great in the back half of last season for us too. First half of the season, not so much. Now, granted, we did still have like Zach LaVine and stuff, and we were trying to figure things out, so that could be part of the reason. I would like to see him maybe assert himself more into the offense as like a more scoring option this year. Of course, I would say Kobe White's going to be our first option, um, but I would actually like to see Giddy be maybe the second option in our offense. I think aside from him, Kobe, and Vucevic, there's nobody else that really should be taking more shots than that. I would say Buzelis, and really, I think Buzelis should be a higher option than Vucevic. I don't think that's going to happen yet this year. So I expect him to be like the fourth option behind Vucevic, at least unless he gets traded Vucevic. But I do think Giddy should be the second scoring option. And if he can teeter with that 20 point per game mark, he's already going to be one of the best rebounding guards in the league. Like you said, one of the best facilitators in the Eastern Conference. I think he could be an all-star this year, especially if we're at least mid.
I have been pretty public about, I don't want to call it disdain because that's not what it is. I think that while Josh Giddey, the offensive talent, is very good, I just think that there are other aspects to his game that are very severely lacking. And I know that I wouldn't want to employ that kind of player on my team. Peyton Pritchard is a good example. He's a better defender than what Josh Giddey is, but still limited defensively. If you're that like sixth man off the bench, if you're a scoring punch, that makes sense. That archetype. I just want my lead guard, one of my lead guards, to be slightly better of a defender. So I have been pretty public about my criticism of him, and whenever he does what he averages 17, 9, and 8, I will be as loud in my praise as I was in my disrespect. What what does he need to do this year for you to qualify as a success and to not think that $25 million a year is a waste?
I mean, so for me, I already think the contract that we gave him is a slight underpay from what he gave us last year. Um, so I would want him to bare minimum. I don't think he should be having a worse year than last year. If he has a worse year statistically than last year, it's going to look bad. Um, but even if he's just upping his points by a little bit, his efficiency by a little bit, it would be a success for year one. And then just to the other point, I will say that what you said. I know that obviously defensively he can be a cone of sorts. What I will say is, I mean, there are teams who, a lot of the top teams do have players like that. I mean, you even heard that I think it was Kevin Durant talked about it, where he said like the Cavs they're going at Darius Garland every time, or Pacers maybe it's Halliburton, or the Knicks it's Jalen Brunson or Luca or Trey Young. So I don't think that that's totally a big deal, but that just means that you need to have the right complementary pieces around him. Um, Kobe White has shown a capability, to do that on the defensive end. Maybe not so much consistency, but I think he has gotten better. And I think adding a guy like Isaac Okoro, I think Buzelis, Noah Asenge, like we're definitely fleshing out our roster more to that capacity where we will have more defensive minded players. Still got to get rid of Vucevic, but I mean, aside from that, like I think it's trending in the right direction to have a guy like Josh Giddey on the team, and even if you know it does happen like that, and we want to go with our bench unit, or maybe we just want to run Kobe White at the one, I think we can do that. He's shown that he can take that responsibility, and granted, like I said, he's not like some stellar defender himself, but probably an upgrade off of Josh Giddey.
I think the team fit is really important. To Kevin Durant's point, of course, they are attacking Darius Garland, but they also have Evan Mobley and they also have Jared Allen. You know what I mean? And DeAndre Hunter, pretty good defender now. I want you all to have those good defenders. I know that you hate Patrick Williams. I get it. I do think he's a good defender. Isaac Okoro is a good defender. Kobe White is better than what people give him credit for. So I think that you could have the pieces. It's just a matter of time, like you said.
I don't know, man. I watched Donovan Mitchell go crazy on Patrick Williams in a 71-point game. Like, so that's like the only man. I just don't know. Like I'm just at a point where I'm done with Patrick Williams. So you probably won't ever hear me say anything positive about him, except for when he walks out the door and turns in his practice jersey. So
Then I will help him pack his bags.
then I'll thank him.
Now that we've had all this fun trashing Patrick Williams and talking about the additions to your team, we do have to touch on the bad. We have to touch on the departure here. We traded away Lonzo Ball to get Isaac Okoro back. I think it's really hard to say that you will miss someone or something when it was so infrequent that you got to see him actually play. But other than the obvious defense and the playmaking, is there something about Lonzo, whether that's personal or about his game, that you'll miss on this team?
I've always been a fan of Lonzo, even when he was in college. Actually, you know, like usually like my dad likes a lot of the same players that I do, and sometimes it's because sometimes he likes them first, and then I naturally like him. But a lot of times too, it's a player that I like, and then he likes. And that's like one player he just like never really got behind, but for some reason, like I just always liked Lonzo. Maybe his dad, like LeVar, like he was a little bit crazy, um, but he was only doing that like to help out his kid. I've always been a fan of Lonzo, though. I feel like as a player, he's definitely a winning player. And remember, like we were the first seed when he was healthy for us. And granted, then he wasn't healthy for 2.5 years. He came back. He wasn't necessarily the same player, but I still think that he was a good player. Maybe not defensively last year as good as he was before that, but I still think he was good enough defensively. That playmaking, that facilitating never really went anywhere. He just got less playing time and he didn't play back to backs. So I know he'll thrive in Cleveland. Like I said, he is a winning player. All he needs to do is really stay healthy, and I could see him being like an X factor for them too. Kind of the same way that I guess Caruso was for the Thunder this past year. So we'll see. I mean, but I will miss him because, like I said, I've always kind of been a fan of his. So
When we're looking at the team overview for the season, we've talked about the roster and we've kind of alluded to it multiple times throughout. What are your realistic expectations for the year? And I know that you're not very high, but try your best. Be a fan. Tell me you're going to win 82 games.
I mean, as much as I would love to do that, I do think it will be more of the same phony love story again. Um, like, and I'm not gonna totally hate because I know we aren't the worst team in the league. Like, we're better than the Nets in my opinion. We're better than the Hornets. Um, we're better than the Raptors in my opinion. I
The
mean,
bar's
to be
just so
honest,
high.
I mean, to be honest though, like depending which way you guys go this season, I could see you guys just making this a throwaway year, and maybe we do have a better record than you. Not to say that we are a better team when fully healthy, but for this season alone, it's possible. So I think that 7 to 10 range is probably the likeliest scenario. Actually, I was just kind of going through this a couple days ago and thinking like, who's going to be the top 8 in the East, and I kept finding myself putting the Bulls like right at 9. So it is probably going to be right about there, which I mean doesn't take us out of the playoffs necessarily if we get through the play-in, but I feel like if we get to that spot and we don't make the playoffs, it's gonna feel like what gives. You know what I mean? Like you're just in the same spot for the last several years. Like at least just get there. It's been the same kind of story for three. Well, no, it's been the same story for like 3 years now. So
As an objective fan, as an outside fan, I certainly hope that you escape this Groundhog Day.
I mean, I would love to, and I like I said, I do think if we play to our potential, we could be as high as fourth. But I think that's maybe like the best case scenario. I think sixth seed is an obtainable goal. Fifth or sixth seed is really obtainable this year in the East because you're looking at Cleveland and you're looking at the Knicks. Those are the two teams that have shown it that are coming back, and then I'm personally high on what Atlanta did this summer. I think that Orlando really has always had it, and now they added Bane. Everything else, I think, is kind of up for grabs. You don't know what the Sixers are going to do. The Pacers, Bucks, Celtics are all limited. The Heat, a full season now without Jimmy Butler, and then the Pistons are still not bad, but they also did lose a few of their guys that won them a lot of games last year. So it's not out of the realm of possibility, but I think the safest option is probably putting us around that 8 or 9 spot. But I think 6 is achievable.
When we're at the end of the year, 82nd game is done. What do you need to see to call this season a success?
I need to see a direction. Um, like whether that's fully locking in on the extreme roster rebuilding, fleshing out Vucevic, fleshing out Javon Carter, and fleshing out some of the guys who will not help us in the long run, like Patrick Williams and Dalen Terry, or it's by us actually making the playoffs and maybe getting some newfound experience to our young core, because some of these guys have made the playoffs before, maybe like once. Like Kobe White was on our team when we made it that one year with DeRozan and Levine, and Josh Giddey. I know he was on it not this past year, but the year before with the Thunder. But they didn't really get a whole lot of experience, and they didn't really have probably the roles that they have right now. So that's what I would like to see.
I think it's as good of a place to transition into what I'm calling a content corner. Of course, I'm bringing on content creators to kind of pick their brains and ask what is your why. What started you on this content creation journey? Obviously, you've had a modicum of success, like we talked about in the intro. So, what was the starting moment that brought you here?
I started content creation just because I've always been a fan of video production and audio production stuff. I actually went to college to double major in journalism and telecommunication news, uh, and so kind of post college, even my job right now, kind of involves writing and photography and being an editor and stuff. So not totally as much the video and audio stuff, which is why it makes it fun here to do it with something that I enjoy a lot, which I've been an NBA fan for almost like 2 decades now, like that I've been watching consistently. So I would say that's kind of, I guess, the why.
Are there some content creators that growing up that you really looked to and they kind of inspired you to be here, or maybe even now that they kind of inspire your content a little bit?
I would say for my content, so when I first, um, maybe when I was about 9 or 10 years old, I've always played 2K, my league, and a lot of people were like, my team, my career, that was their mode. Like I had stuck to my league a lot just because I like to learn about all the players and see their careers and what teams they played on and stuff, and that just helped me kind of you know track, I guess, the history of where a lot of these guys ended up going. And then like I'd see videos of guys like Mike Korzemba and Nick Smith NBA, who those guys kind of did videos of their own, and like what if Kobe was on the Hornets, or just a bunch of these other things as well. Like, what if LeBron and Dwayne Wade went to the Bulls or something? Uh, and then I was like, trying to, like, I went through, I think from 2011 up until 2020, which is when I made a video too for like Kawhi to the Pacers, because he was actually drafted by the Pacers. I know some people don't know, but, and then I went through year by year and just tried to figure out how many wins each team would get from each different move, and then where players would actually sign if their teams looked a lot different, based on rumors that were going on at the time. And so, I mean, that one did really well. And then also, like, I started doing my mid-season podcast, the Baloney Basketball thing. And then, I don't know, I just kind of realized that this journey is a great way to get connected with other creators. It could even help on my resume, but also just making unique content. And so that's kind of like what I like doing now, especially with whether it's a tournament or doing just random fun NBA games. I did like a 3v3 NBA Family Feud once, and then even just like stuff. I think I did like a Guess Who NBA thing as well, NBA riddles, and then I've even done some IRL stuff as well, where we did like 1v1 King of the Court for basketball, and then 2v2 dodgeball, 1v1 mini golf, like just, I don't know, even all sorts of sports stuff, mostly basketball, but branching out every now and then. I think it's just fun to do some unique stuff.
We do love a good tournament here. shameless plug for the both of us, your boy, yours truly will be on an upcoming tournament. Don't have a release date yet, but it will be on the way soon. Make sure that you're subscribed to Super Mario Hoops so you can see both of us in a tournament setting. Now that you have all the success, right? There's still more. You still have more goals, right? Now that you've had this success, if someone came up to you, a young content creator, aspiring content creator, what's a piece of advice that you would give them above all else?
I think the biggest thing, and even I'm not super great at it, is just consistency is key. And I say I'm not great at it, I guess, with the uploading side of things, because you could always put out maybe shorts, reels, something that is relative to your channel that's always going to get people checking it out. Um, but even if you're just consistent with your editing and working towards a long term project or putting out a bunch of short term projects, whatever it may be, um, and of course, for a lot of people, life comes first. Like this is just kind of a thing on the side or something, or at least that's usually how it starts out. Um, but you should also just enjoy doing what you're doing too. Uh, all the content that I make, I also edit. So I know some people probably think like, oh, you do like a 3 hour tournament thing or 2 hour tournament. Like, but I edit all of that, because I want it to have kind of my touch on it. You know what I mean? Uh, and I would just say the product that you want, and I guess just doing the things that you want to do. That's the most important thing. And I feel like sometimes people get lost in that. And they want to stick by a schedule, but if you want to, talk about so and so, like go do it. If you want to do a friggin' tournament, go do it. Whatever that is. I think that that's kind of the biggest thing.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. Of course, I've had other content creators come on for this series, and that seems like a through line through all of it. You got to be consistent, but you also have to love it. I think it's really easy to tell when someone doesn't, and that's when internally they just shut it off. They just go, okay, well, he doesn't care about it. Why should I? So being consistent and being genuine is ultra important. Absolutely.
And just for me too, one other thing to add to that is like even though like the consistency thing is probably the best trait that you could add to it, but like I'm pretty much every day I'm doing something for my channel, whether it's like actually editing or I'm posting stuff. I might not post every day, but maybe I'm editing a video, maybe I'm editing a graphic for Instagram, because I've actually been doing some of those too, especially with my tournaments. So something one way or another that I'm like, okay, like I can be proud of like the work I'm doing.
Last question before we transition into my favorite part of these content creator episodes. I'm interested to see what your answer will be because I've had a pretty wide variety of answers on these other episodes. This season's upcoming. At the time of recording, we're like 40-ish days away from tip off. What are your content creator goals for the upcoming season?
I think just kind of developing a content plan and getting shorts and reels out more consistently. Like I said, um, of course, I'm sure most of the people that are doing this, like they all work, or they're in school if they're younger. Uh, so usually it's just, and especially like me, sometimes my schedule can vary week to week. So trying to find out like what are the best times to do something like that. If it's a video I do on my own, or if it's like if I'm collabing with someone as legendary as Roundball Renaissance, then I gotta figure that out, and plan things accordingly. I do have like more ideas for, I guess, bigger scale stuff in down the line, even for like the rest of this year. Both with my podcast that I plan to do like throughout the season, and also just like more tournaments or more mini games or things like that. More NBA videos because I really haven't done too many in a while, but I've been wanting to do those again. Just talking about some old school players as well. That was one of the things I really liked doing a couple years ago, and I've kind of drifted away from that with the tournament stuff. So it's just kind of finding a way to like mix it up, keep things fresh, and having a plan for all that. But the one thing that's good about me is I'm usually pretty good about maybe meeting deadlines or just trying to plan things accordingly on the fly. So um, yeah, just trying to knock out as many of those projects as I can.
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to all the projects that you have coming up. Of course, like I said, I will be in an upcoming tournament, hopefully more projects in the future if I'm ever brought back. I want to transition now into, again, like I said, my favorite part of these creator episodes. For those at home, I give all of my guests outlines. That way they can kind of hone in their thoughts and not be misquoted or misspeak or anything. In this section, the rapid fire, the lightning round, I keep all of those questions to myself. I just kind of want to keep my guests on their toes. So it's 5 questions. You don't have to give an elaborate answer if you don't want to. 5 questions. Are you ready?
I don't know how lightning I will be, but I am ready. I will try to give a good answer for each one.
Hey, listen, I have loved and appreciated all of the guests that I've had so far. No one has been very lightningy. So when I post those
Okay.
on my short forms, I edit those into a minute. So hey, whatever you got, I'll take. Question number one: other than probably the obvious answer, Michael Jordan. Other than Michael Jordan, what is one Bulls player you wish you could have watched live?
Ooh, this is an interesting one, but I am going to go, and I got a good answer for you. Um, I'm actually going to go with Bob Love. And I say Bob Love because he played in the 70s. He was actually on our team that made the 1975 Western Conference Finals back when we were in the Western Conference Finals. We were one win away from going to the finals. We lost to the Warriors. The Warriors swept the Bullets after that. So a lot of people don't realize we were mad close to winning a championship that year. And the reason I say Bob Love, though, is not only because his jersey is retired, but I actually met him. I know he recently passed away. Uh, Rest in peace to Bob Love. But I did meet him. Actually, I was playing at like I think I was like 8 or 9 years old, and I was in a league. We had like 3 games that day. I think I had like a 9, a 10, and a noon game. And between my 9 and 10 game, Bob Love was just standing there in the court right between there. And then me and my sister took a photo with him, and I still have the photo to this day. But yeah, man, it would have been cool to see him play live because, well, I will say too, Jerry Sloan, both of them, Mister Original Bull per se, but those two guys are the other two that weren't so much in the modern era or more modern era where you can see things on tape so much that have their jerseys retired by the Bulls. I mean, we can see like Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen highlights pretty much anywhere. We can see full games of them anywhere. And now Derrick Rose, of course, like I grew up on him. But those two guys, but to give you one answer, Bob Love.
Question number two: you are a huge Nintendo fan. It should be mentioned if your username wasn't obvious enough. Most underrated Nintendo game.
Most underrated Nintendo game. So I'm a big Mario guy.
Were you?
Actually,
I
my
couldn't.
favorite.
I couldn't tell. I.
Yeah, yeah. In case you didn't know, no, I'm actually super Kirby hoops. Um,
I'm doing a rebrand
uh,
right now.
yeah, but no. Anyways, so my favorite game ever is Super Mario Bros. 3 on the NES. That is the peak game for me, the goat game. Um, but I will give you another Mario game that I feel like is a little underrated. Is Mario Kart Super Circuit. I don't know why people hate on it so much. You know, this prior to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe adding DLC had the most courses of any Mario Kart game. And it was the first one on handheld, and it came out in 2001, which I might be a little bit biased because I was born in the same year. But also, it was the first game I played, maybe a little bit more biased. But I just enjoyed the game a lot. And there was, in all the Mario Karts I've played, because I've played all of them, this is the only one where I feel like you could really use shortcuts like crazy bouncing off of the walls, essentially. Because there were a lot of springs on the sides of the courses you go. Like Lakeside Park, Ribbon Road, which is by far my favorite Mario Kart course ever, I will say. Uh, Courses like that. Rainbow Road, even in that game, it just feels like a trampoline park. So I don't know why you haven't seen too much of that in maybe other Mario Karts. I think it would be kind of cool to have a little bit more gimmicky aspects to it that you can skillfully use to your advantage. But I don't know why people hate on Mario Kart Super Circuit. It's not the worst Mario Kart.
In this same vein, favorite Mario sports game. I am going to add a caveat to this. We have to
Okay.
exclude Mario Kart. I think it's really easy to say, oh, Mario Kart 8 or whatever the case is. But
Okay.
excluding the Mario Kart games, favorite Mario sports game.
Okay. And to be honest, I wasn't gonna give you an answer of that just because I will give you an answer, but I'm also gonna give a slight shout out to another one. Um, Answer's got to be Mario Super Sluggers. Uh, just a
Easy one.
baseball masterpiece right there. And I'm low key a little bit upset that in the recent Nintendo Direct, we didn't get a Mario baseball thing. Even though I'm looking forward to the new Mario tennis game, don't get me wrong, but we have so many Mario tennis games. Like, don't you think we could have got a new baseball one with even more characters? I mean, it's been so long since a Mario baseball game. Rosalina wasn't even in that one, and now she's like one of the main kind of characters in the Mario franchise. So I think that they're due for a new Mario game. Mario Super Sluggers had a great story mode, great fields as well. I love the Donkey Kong one. I love Bowser Jr.'s playroom. That one's probably the most colorful, most iconic for me. Yoshi Park hitting it in the train. That's just a legendary feeling. Um, but another one I will give credit to, it is actually a Mario Tennis game, but specifically for me, the one on the Game Boy Color, because you don't actually go through story mode as Mario. You got to actually beat Mario and Peach at the end in a doubles game or just Mario in a solo game, and it's one of the better story modes I think I've seen because you really have to level up through starting at like a lower class level. Then you got to go to junior varsity. Then you got to go to like a world exhibition tournament thing, and it's just really cool to see like the progression of that. I'm hoping they have that in the new Mario Tennis though, because there is supposed to be an adventure mode. But to give you my real answer, Mario Super Sluggers is definitely the main one.
Love that game. I also wanted to give a quick shout out to the Mario and Sonic Olympic Games. I thought the London one was really
Yeah.
good, and I also thought Beijing was really good.
I will say of those ones, my favorite was actually 2010, the Winter Olympic Games in 2010 on the DS specifically, because that had a good story mode too. I feel like when games have a great story mode that you wouldn't think should have a story mode, it really takes the game to a whole other level.
Bringing us back to the Bulls centric episode here. Biggest
Okay.
Bulls what if?
I want to think of something like super unique, but I feel like it just has to be Derrick Rose. Um, if he doesn't get hurt in 2012, I am a firm believer that we win the championship that year. Um, you know, I know the Heat were great, and maybe that was the moment they're in the conference finals where maybe like LeBron overcame like I guess his demons of 2011 and the years before that. Um, but I do think that we had a team that was ready, that was not fearful of them, and was just as hungry for that. Um, I think that we, like I said even earlier in the show, 2011, we were a really good team. We were the best record in the league, and we were actually the same thing in 2012. But our best player missed majority of the season. People forget that part too. Like Derrick Rose was an All Star in 2012, and he was still, in my opinion, a top three player in the league at that given point in time. But he missed a lot of games, and we were on like a 67 win pace for a full season. With him. Of course, that was the lockout year, so we went to 167 games at that rate. But if we were playing like a full 82 games at that rate, we would have won 67 games, and that's rare to come across. So I gotta go with that. That's just got to be the one.
And last one before we get you out of here. Of course, we're both aspiring content creators. Bulls player who you think you would make the best content creator.
This I feel like this has to be Modest Buzelis. I mean, this guy's already like I've seen him going to. I saw him going to a lot of the big three games, and I think he interviewed a couple people there. I think he interviewed a few people at the NBA Finals. They let him in as like one of the player people courtside. I think he interviewed maybe Miles Turner. It was this past year, but I think he's ready. I think that he could have that opportunity, and also he just has a great personality. That's another reason why I'm such a big fan of him because I feel like it's just really easy to, um, just talk to him and have a good time. Some people are maybe a little bit more reserved, focus on the questions, more serious with it, but I feel like he'd be a pretty chill guy to hang out with and especially have a conversation with, post game interview with. I think that he's definitely the guy to go to.
That was also my answer. Definitely can't argue it there. Definitely seems the most lively out of that crew right now.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you hopping on. I think it was a really solid episode. Of course, I'm looking forward to this big tournament that you're coming out with. We have in the description of this video, we of course have your YouTube and Instagram and Twitter and TikTok. Let everyone know what you're working on, where to find you.
Yes, sir. So again, as he was saying, you can find me at Super Mario Hoops 24 on Instagram and on TikTok. and on YouTube, of course. Um, Twitter's a little bit different. It's SMH24YT double underscore, which it's tough, but Twitter does not like me so much. I will just say that. So I have had my struggles with them with getting the actual Super Mario Hoops 24 name. But anyways, everything else, Super Mario Hoops 24, you can find me at. And yeah, just working on, of course, editing right now a tournament that your guys' favorite content creator, Roundball Renaissance, will be a part of, and along with many others. So you'll have to check it out. If someone watching this that so happens to already know about my channel, there will be some returning contestants in there, but also a lot of new ones too. So there is a lot to look forward to, and then just a bunch of new stuff. The season's right around the corner, so I will be starting out with my consistent uploads again, with talking about what's going on during the season, and then maybe mini games that happen, and some more IRL content, which I have not done in quite a while, but I do have one thing that's coming with that too. So you guys will have to stay tuned for that.
Absolutely. All the links are going to be at the top of the description. Again, really appreciate you hopping on. Love this episode. Love that we got to chat. That's going to do it for me. That's going to do it for Super Mario Hoops. Be kind. Tell somebody you love them. And I'll see you in the next one.
Barely scraping by. Trying to stop puffing. I'm trying to be one of the greats.